wonder if...
Hi, Mel.
What are you doing?
Paying for the push-up. It's coffee.
1, 2, 3, 4.
If you grew up in the 1960s or watched the reruns through the decades that followed, The Dick Van Dyke Show probably feels like an old friend. You know the living room, you know the faces, you know the laugh. But even after all those viewings, the show is still hiding things. Production stories, casting near misses, design choices, and running jokes that only reward the closest attention. Here are 20 small details you missed in The Dick Van Dyke Show, 1961.
Television programs to watch?
There's a special on juvenile delinquency. I don't know the time or channel, but there's a program.
Detail 20. The original pilot starred a completely different cast. Most people know The Dick Van Dyke Show began with Carl Reiner. What fewer know is that it almost began as Carl Reiner's vehicle, with Reiner playing the lead himself. In 1959, Reiner wrote and shot a pilot called Head of the Family, starring himself as Robbie Petrie, pronounced with a long E. Petrie, rather than the short E that Van Dyke later used. Laura Petrie was played by Barbara Britton. Buddy Sorrell was played by Morty Gunty. Sally Rogers was played by Sylvia Miles. The character of Richie was played by Gary Morgan. The show's sponsor rejected it. Westerns were the dominant genre on American television in 1960, and the pilot was considered too inside baseball for a general audience. The Alan Brady character was present under a different name, Alan Sturdy, played by Jack Wakefield, who was never seen fully on camera, a deliberate choice that the eventual Dick Van Dyke Show would carry forward with Carl Reiner's version of the character. Producer Sheldon Leonard looked at the pilot and told Reiner plainly, "We'll get a better actor than you to play you." Reiner was a gifted performer, but he was recognizably and specifically Jewish in a way that he himself later acknowledged made the character's mass appeal more uncertain for network television in that era. The show needed someone who could carry a suburban domestic comedy and appeal to the broadest possible audience. That search led first to Johnny Carson, who was on Reiner's list, and then to Dick Van Dyke, who had just come off his Broadway triumph in Bye Bye Birdie. Leonard suggested Van Dyke. Reiner agreed, and the show that almost became a showcase for Reiner became one of television's great ensemble productions instead.
Well, you see that empty setting there in Pittsburgh? That was Uncle Jonah.
Was?
Yeah, the stone dropped down, Uncle Jonah dropped.
Detail 19. The name was almost pronounced differently. A small detail that gets overlooked. In the Head of the Family pilot, Carl Reiner's version of the character pronounced his own last name, Petrie, with a long E, like the dish. When the show was reworked with Dick Van Dyke in the lead, the pronunciation was changed to Petrie, with a short E. The character's first name also shifted. Reiner had called him Robbie, while the Van Dyke version became Rob. Both changes were subtle ways of distinguishing the new show from its rejected predecessor, and both stuck permanently as part of the character's identity.
For my wife, she can use it for a pincushion.
It's a pretty big pincushion.
She got big pins.
Oh, yeah, I forgot. She's very tall.
Detail 18. The show was nearly canceled after season 1. The Dick Van Dyke Show debuted on CBS on October 3rd, 1961. Its first season placed 80th in the Nielsen ratings, with a rating of 16.1, numbers that were, by any reasonable measure, poor. CBS decided to cancel it. The show was quietly dropped from the schedule. What saved it was co-producer Danny Thomas, who took it upon himself to personally visit CBS network executives and make the case for a second season. Thomas argued that the summer rerun viewership had shown genuine audience growth, that the show was finding its audience, just not on the network's preferred timeline. CBS reconsidered. They agreed to a second season. The show debuted its second year on September 26, 1962 and finished that season ranked 9th overall with a rating of 27.1. The jump from 80th to 9th in a single season was one of the most dramatic turnarounds in early 1960s television.
We gotta get a new delicatessen.
What's the matter?
You haven't come up with a fresh idea in months.
I only got 2 hands.
Detail 17. The famous Ottoman opening was filmed after wrapping episode 32. The original first season opening credits featured a manila folder with still photographs of the cast. Pleasant, but unremarkable. For the second season, Carl Reiner went to director John Rich and said, almost as an afterthought after a long day of filming, that they needed something new. Rich recalled the exchange with the Television Academy. He'd just finished shooting episode 32 when Reiner said he needed a clever opening and had no idea what it should be. Rich, tired and improvising, said something to the effect of, "Let's put everyone in the living room and see what happens." In a single evening, still wearing the costumes from episode 32, the cast filmed the pratfall, Van Dyke tripping over the ottoman, and the alternate version where he deftly sidesteps it. The costumes are still visible if you look carefully. They match what Buddy, Sally, and Laura are wearing in the closing scenes of that episode.
Well, leave that to me, Rob. When Sally Rogers sings, nobody sleeps and nobody walks. All my dreams are over.
Detail 16. The Ottoman fall was choreographed, not accidental. For years, some audiences assumed the fall was a real accident that Carl Reiner had included as a happy mistake. It was entirely planned and carefully rehearsed. Dick Van Dyke is a trained physical comedian. He performed stunts throughout the show's run and had a background in stage and television that made precision physical comedy second nature. The fall over the ottoman was choreographed, rehearsed, and filmed intentionally. Van Dyke has said in interviews that he can still demonstrate the fall on request, though he acknowledges it now comes with consequences. The ability to roll over one shoulder and land flat on his back without injuring himself came from a silent film comedian who, according to John Rich, taught Van Dyke the technique directly: drop and roll, protect the head, absorb the impact through the shoulder.
Yes.
Detail 15. 3 different opening versions were filmed and rotated. Most people know there were 2 versions of the famous Ottoman opening, the fall and the sidestep. There was actually a third. In the third version, Van Dyke begins to sidestep the ottoman, avoids it successfully, and then stumbles anyway, tripping over his own feet rather than the furniture. This variation appeared occasionally during season 3. Carl Reiner's original intention was to rotate all available versions randomly across the show's run so that viewers never knew in advance which version they would see. Viewers took notice. According to Van Dyke, people were placing genuine bets before each episode on which version would appear. People were placing bets on whether I would or wouldn't, he told Entertainment Weekly. The Ottoman became a weekly game, which was arguably more effective as a viewer hook than any single consistent opening could have been.
I came here to write for him, not to kiss him.
Rob, wait a minute. We really don't need you. Old blubber notes.
Detail 14. Mary Tyler Moore's capri pants triggered a sponsor revolt. When the Dick Van Dyke Show premiered in 1961, television housewives wore dresses. June Cleaver wore a dress. Donna Reed wore a dress. The expectation, held by networks, sponsors, and much of the industry, was that the aspirational TV wife presented herself in formal domestic attire at all times, regardless of what she was doing. Mary Tyler Moore had a different view. She told the producers that she didn't wear dresses and heels to vacuum her own apartment, and that the women she knew didn't either. She pushed for Laura Petrie to wear capri pants, the fitted mid-calf slacks that were fashionable among young women in the early 1960s. In a 1995 NPR interview, she recalled saying, "I don't do that, and I don't know any of my friends that do that, so why don't we try to make this real?" Procter & Gamble, a major sponsor of the show, was not pleased. P&G executives visited Carl Reiner's office on an ongoing basis throughout the show's run to complain about the pants. They wanted Laura in a dress for at least one scene per episode. Reiner later recalled that they came to him constantly and said, "Capri pants are not what people wear," to which he responded, "That's what she wears all the time." A compromise of sorts was struck. Laura would appear in a dress in at least one scene per episode, but the pants stayed, and so did Moore's commitment to wearing them. The fit of the pants also came in for network scrutiny. Dick Van Dyke himself recalled that CBS told the production the pants were a little too tight in the rear end and required the fit to be let out. Laura Petrie's capri pants became a cultural touchstone. Among the first times a woman on American network television was shown dressed for the actual activity of being at home rather than for the activity of being observed.
This? Oh, that's all right. That one's yours. I got my own right here. Where'd you get that one?
Detail 13. Carl Reiner based the entire show on his own life. The Dick Van Dyke Show was not a fictional invention. It was Carl Reiner's biography, lightly fictionalized. Reiner had spent the early 1950s as a writer and performer on Your Show of Shows and Caesar's Hour, working alongside Sid Caesar in a writer's room that also included Mel Brooks, Neil Simon, and Larry Gelbart. Rob Petrie was Reiner. The Alan Brady Show was Caesar's show. The writer's room dynamic, the rapid-fire pitching, the competitive wit, the professional relationships built around shared creative work was drawn directly from Reiner's own experience. Alan Brady himself, the egocentric variety star played by Reiner in the show, was described by Reiner as an amalgamation of Milton Berle and Jackie Gleason in his overbearing characterization, though the working dynamic between Rob and Brady drew more broadly from the complicated emotional reality of working for a difficult employer who was also, in moments, brilliant. The specific suburb in which the Petries lived, New Rochelle, was where Reiner himself had lived during the Caesar years. The commute to Manhattan, the split-level house, the two-car garage, the young son, all of it was Reiner's actual life transplanted into television. He was not writing about a world he imagined, he was writing about a world he had inhabited. The real writer's room alumni were aware of what Reiner was doing and generally took it in stride. Mel Brooks, who had been one of Reiner's colleagues on Caesar's shows, later said the show was Reiner at his most personally revealing. Simon, who went on to write some of the most important American comedies of the 1960s, cited the show's writer's room sequences as a direct ancestor of his own work.
You know, smoking jacket, ascot. Oh, and see if you can grow a mustache.
Gotcha.
Mark.
Detail 12. The show was shot at Dieselou Studios. The Dick Van Dyke Show was produced at Dieselou Studios on Cahuenga Boulevard in Hollywood, the same studio complex that had been built by Lucille Ball and Daisy Arnaz, and which at the time of production also housed I Love, Lucy's permanent sets, and later became home to Star Trek and Mission Impossible. The connection to I Love Lucy was not coincidental. The production used 3 cameras filming before a live studio audience, a technique that had been popularized by I Love Lucy and which the Dick Van Dyke Show embraced and refined. Van Dyke later made a point of noting that the show used a real studio audience that laughed at real material. There was no laugh track added in post-production. If a joke didn't land with the live audience during filming, the writers knew immediately and could adjust before the episode was locked. This commitment to earning actual laughter rather than manufacturing the appearance of it, was one of the reasons the show held up so cleanly in decades of reruns. Canned laughter dates, real audience response does not.
Now go put some clothes on.
Darling, these are just leotards. You've seen me wear them before.
I know.
Detail 11. The production schedule was designed around audience feedback. Carl Reiner implemented a production schedule that was unusual for its era. According to a 1961 article in the Meriden Record Journal of Connecticut, the show conducted 2 complete run-throughs of each script on consecutive nights, with a live audience present for both evenings. The first run-through was a diagnostic. The writers and producers watched where the audience responded and where they didn't, and used that information to revise the script before the second performance. The second evening was the actual filmed version. This 2-night process gave the writers a real-time testing mechanism that most sitcoms did not have, and it contributed directly to the consistency of the show's comedy. Weak jokes didn't survive to the final tape.
I need a clean rag, some turpentine, and about this much white wine.
Detail 10. Jerry Paris directed much of the show while also playing a character in it. Jerry Paris appears throughout the series as Jerry Helper, the Petrie's next-door neighbor and a dentist. He was also one of the show's primary directors, helming the majority of episodes after director John Rich departed. The dual role, performing in front of the camera and directing behind it, was unusual but not unprecedented, and Paris navigated it with what cast members described as professional ease. He went on to become one of the most prolific sitcom directors in American television, with Happy Days providing his most sustained subsequent success. He directed most of that series' episodes across its 11-year run, and his experience on the Dick Van Dyke Show was where the foundation of that career was built. Paris died in March 1986.
Don't worry about that, Sally. You know what happens when they introduce me in a nightclub? The guy comes out and says, "Here's Jackie Brewster." And the whole audience says, "Who's he?"
Detail 9. Maury Amsterdam was essentially playing himself. Maury Amsterdam, who played Buddy Sorrell across all 5 seasons, brought a specific biographical reality to the role that the scripts didn't fully account for until the writers understood who they had. Amsterdam had been a professional comedian and comedy writer since the 1930s, a former child prodigy who had been performing on radio and in vaudeville. He was, among other things, a songwriter and a rapid-fire joke machine, the kind of comedian who could generate one-liners on demand with the discipline of a craftsman. The writers initially wrote Buddy as a conventional comedy sidekick. Once they understood Amsterdam's specific qualities, they wrote to them. Buddy became the one-liner machine, the insult comic, the man who always had a comeback ready before the setup was finished. Amsterdam was not acting a character. He was performing a heightened version of the way he had operated his entire professional life.
Doc, where's the food?
It's in the kitchen. Look, why don't you two try to figure out how to save the world, and Millie and I will make mushroom omelets.
Detail 8. Alan Brady's face was hidden for the first several seasons. Carl Reiner played Alan Brady, the egocentric variety star for whom Rob Petrie writes, but Brady's face was deliberately hidden for the show's first few seasons. The character was talked about extensively, referenced in almost every episode, and treated as a looming presence in the Petrie professional world. But the audience never saw him clearly. He might appear from behind, or with his face cut from the frame, or with his back turned. When Brady finally appeared on camera, the joke was that the man behind the legend was recognizable as exactly the kind of insufferable talent that everyone had imagined.
Cut my throat with him, that's what.
Detail 7. The the Petrie's home was set in New Rochelle, New York. Rob and Laura Petrie lived at 448 Bonnie Meadow Road in New Rochelle, New York, a suburban address that placed the family in a specific and deliberate social context. New Rochelle was and is a Westchester County suburb that represents a particular kind of comfortable commuter life, close enough to Manhattan to work in television, residential enough to raise a family, aspirational without being extravagant. Carl Reiner himself lived in New Rochelle when he was writing for Sid Caesar, and the address was a direct autobiographical transplant into the show's geography. The split-level home, the suburban street, and the commute into the city, all of it reflected Reiner's actual life in the early 1950s as closely as the fictional writing room reflected his professional one.
You did, huh? Well, Rob, I'll tell you what you have to do now. You go home, break every dance record in the house, and right away you and Laura have a baby.
Detail 6. The theme song had lyrics that were almost never used. Earl Hagen composed the show's theme music, the bouncy, immediately recognizable jazz melody that opens every episode. What most people don't know is that the theme had actual lyrics, written to accompany the melody. The lyrics were used only occasionally, sometimes to close certain episodes or in promotional materials, and were not part of the standard broadcast version. Most viewers never heard them. The instrumental version was the one that became culturally embedded, and the lyrics fell into obscurity. Hagen was an extraordinarily prolific television composer. He also wrote the theme for The Andy Griffith Show, which was whistled by Andy Griffith himself in that show's opening sequence.
Tell me where I might find Robert Petrie.
Who are you?
Detail 5. The show won 15 Emmy Awards in 5 seasons. The Dick Van Dyke Show was nominated for 25 Primetime Emmy Awards during its 5-season run and won 15 of them. That included 5 consecutive Outstanding Comedy Series wins, an unbroken run from 1964 through 1966, plus 2 earlier awards, multiple writing awards, and multiple acting wins. Dick Van Dyke won Outstanding Lead Actor in a Comedy Series 5 times. Mary Tyler Moore won Outstanding Lead Actress twice. Rosemarie, Maury Amsterdam, and Richard Deacon were all nominated for Supporting Performance Awards. The show also received 2 Golden Globe Awards and 3 Writers Guild of America Awards. Carl Reiner won Writing Awards for his work on the show and was recognized across multiple categories as the series went on. The cumulative award, total across 5 seasons, established the show as not merely popular, but as the consensus standard for quality in American television comedy of the era, a position it held without serious challenge for most of its run.
Hey, Blackie, look, if you put that cue in there and curl that forefinger over, see how that gives you control? Yeah.
Detail 4. Dick Van Dyke was battling alcoholism throughout the show's run. An aspect of the show's behind-the-scenes history that is less widely known. Dick Van Dyke struggled with alcoholism during the production years. He later spoke publicly about it, including in interviews in the 1970s and beyond. He entered a hospital for treatment in 1972, several years after the show ended. His public honesty about the addiction, unusual for a celebrity of his generation, was consistent with the personal directness he had always brought to his work. The performances on screen gave no indication of it. Van Dyke's physical precision and comedic timing remained consistent across all 5 seasons, which is itself a testament to the work ethic and professional discipline he maintained throughout the personal difficulty.
I know how to say this to you, Alan.
Well, I do.
No, he doesn't.
Now what?
Well, Alan, you know, you're not an easy man to work for.
Detail 3. The show ended on its own terms. At number 1. Carl Reiner and Dick Van Dyke made a deliberate decision early in the show's run that they would end it at 5 seasons regardless of where the ratings stood, specifically to protect the quality of the work. They held to that commitment. The final season of The Dick Van Dyke Show aired in 1965 and 1966, and the show went off the air at the peak of its popularity, ranked in the top 20 nationally, and still drawing the loyal audience it had built from the near cancellation of its first season. The last episode, the last chapter, broadcast on June 1st, 1966, brought the series full circle in a characteristically self-aware way. Alan Brady buys Rob's autobiography for a new television project to be written by Rob, Buddy, and Sally. The show ended with the characters doing the same thing the show itself had been doing from the beginning, finding comedy in the business of writing comedy. It was a clean and intentional exit chosen before it was necessary, the opposite of the gradual decline that ended most successful television series of the era. Mary Tyler Moore later described the ending as devastating because the show was her first television family, and the loss of it was genuinely felt by everyone involved.
Okay, folks, that's just about it. No, that's not quite it, Burford. That's all right.
Detail 2, Jerry Van Dyke, was also on the show, playing Dick's brother. Dick Van Dyke's real-life younger brother, Jerry Van Dyke, appeared in the series as Stacy Petrie, Rob's brother. The casting was not primarily a nepotism decision. Jerry Van Dyke was a working comedian and performer in his own right who went on to sustain a decades-long career in television, including a starring role in Coach from 1989 to 1997. But his appearances on The Dick Van Dyke Show gave audiences the unusual pleasure of watching two actual brothers playing fictional brothers, with whatever genuine sibling dynamic existed between them informing the performances in ways that casting two unrelated actors couldn't quite replicate.
What did you do with it, Stanley?
Well, I don't remember.
Detail 1. The show launched two of television's greatest solo careers. When The Dick Van Dyke Show ended in June 1966, it had introduced the television audience to two performers who would each go on to define their own era of American comedy. Dick Van Dyke moved into film, Mary Poppins had already arrived in 1964, and Chitty Chitty Bang Bang followed in 1968, and remained one of the most recognizable entertainers in the world for the following 6 decades. Mary Tyler Moore, whose career Rayner helped launch when he hired her after hearing only 3 lines of dialogue, created The Mary Tyler Moore Show in 1970, which became one of the most important American sitcoms of its own decade. Both performers won Emmy Awards with and after The Dick Van Dyke Show. Both had their careers defined by it, and both became cornerstones of American television comedy in ways that extended far beyond the show itself. The Dick Van Dyke Show ran for 158 episodes across 5 seasons and remains one of the most carefully written, most authentically performed, and most emotionally honest American situation comedies ever made. If you made it all the way to number 1, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. There is a lot more where this came from,